So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Jane Inglis and I'm currently leading the Sustainability and Systems team in the Infrastructure and Services division within Transport for New South Wales. I don't have much time this afternoon, but I'm going to provide a bit of an update on where Transport for New South Wales is in terms of sustainable procurement and some of the frameworks and policies that we are currently developing. So we have three key streams of sustainable procurement work currently being undertaken. We have a social stream, a goods and services stream, and a sustainable procurement framework which covers more the environmental and ethical side of sustainable procurement. So the social stream is being led by our Asset Standards Authority within our Freight Strategy and Planning division. And that covers off the social aspects of procurement, namely the workforce development aspects. So that particular work stream is governed by a social procurement workforce framework, a bit of a mouthful, which includes three different documents. It includes a policy, it includes a procedure, and it includes a reference guide that supports that procedure. That is still in draft form, as per the yellow highlighted parts there. We've been doing a lot of industry consultation over the last 12 months. Some of you here, I think, were part of a big session that we had with industry and different state government agencies the end of last year in relation to this particular suite of documents. But basically it covers off looking at workforce development opportunities for major construction projects within transport. So that's for both roads and public transport. And it covers off projects greater than 10 million capital value. But that's still in draft format and it's looking to be completed around, early this year. That's the plan. So that looks at things like providing guidance to projects on how to meet obviously the mandatory government targets around workforce, such as Aboriginal participation, apprenticeships and traineeships. But then also ask for demand and supply analysis at the very front end of a project to say what other opportunities are there to develop skills in that area, or to look at D&I, diversity and inclusion issues such as women in leadership, youth, long-term unemployed. So it's a very exciting framework and policy that we're looking to complete this year. Then there's goods and services. So that really covers off on what we procure in terms of, say, our IT, our fleet, our cleaning services. So that sits within our finance and investment division, and that is looking at, again, at sort of the environmental ethical side of procurement in the decision making in relation to those goods and services, as well as looking at things like Aboriginal participation in the supply chain, which is something that you touched on, Molly. So that's happening in finance and investment, and that policy is complete. So that's available on our website. So if you Googled goods and services, sustainable procurement, transport for New South Wales, that would hopefully come up. And then the last one here it's actually infrastructure and services, baby. So we are producing a sustainable procurement framework which covers more of the environmental ethical sides of the procurement process or the supply chain. So things like human rights, things like all those things we had up earlier. I think, Chris, you put up some different themes. So carbon, climate change, wastewater, all those things down the supply chain. So why are we doing that? Well, it's driven by actually a commitment in our business plan for this financial year. It's something that we've been passionate about for a long time, which is how we can influence through our large infrastructure spend, how we can influence down the supply chain, good environmental and social practice. It's also driven by environment and sustainability policy that we have as a cluster, as well as our commitments to the government resource efficiency policy, OEH's policy. So we have a lot of policy drivers, and we do also have a very strong leadership commitment to sustainability at both the transport executive level as well as the INS executive level, infrastructure and services level. So we're pretty fortunate in that sense. We have a lot of leadership commitment, we have the policy in place, and we have a good relationship with industry as well. So we're doing a lot of work in this space, which is very exciting. So I'm going to talk to you quickly, and I forgive the acronyms because I'm notice, Robin, you mentioned trying to remove the acronyms from the supply chain, but hopefully some of these will be familiar to a lot of you here. So this is the INS framework, the Infrastructure and Services Sustainable Procurement Framework. So I'm not going to talk at any more detail about the social or the goods and services frameworks that have been developed. So when we were starting to develop this, we thought, well, what does infrastructure and services actually do in terms of what do we procure, what do we purchase? Well, we certainly don't purchase concrete or steel or any of those key construction materials. What we purchase is the services from designers and tier 1 and tier 2 construction firms to build the assets that we are responsible for actually procuring. So what's an important part of our procurement activity and sustainable procurement is what we place into our specifications and into our contracts that we ask our supply chain to meet. So this is where, for the different key procurement categories, which we have up here, so construction, obviously our big infrastructure projects or our small station upgrades, fleet, the rolling stock that we procure, and then the professional services. And I put materials here because sometimes we do, on the odd occasion, procure some technical equipment for a program. But the main procurement activity happens here and here, and of course we have a lot of professional services support. So what we have included in this framework are some of the things that we already have in place, which are our sustainable design guidelines. The reason that's in red is because it's still draft. The next version, version 3, is currently in place. We've got version 4 in draft, looking to be approved around April this year. We have ISCA, so for projects greater than 50 million capital value, we require an ISCA rating, so they have to obviously be a construction-related asset. But for applicable projects over 50 million, an ISCA rating is required. And we've just had confirmation from our executive that we will be developing a process to apply ISCA ratings for smaller, sensitive projects using the small projects tool within ISCA. So ISCA is certainly getting a lot of airtime within transport. And then we have TSR relates to our standard requirements that go into our contracts, COA, conditions of approval. So these are all the tools that we use contractually to embed sustainability into our immediate supply chain. Similarly for fleet and the professional services. And then we have the indirect aspect. So what we did was a heat map analysis, which you might be familiar with that term, but we looked at level of spend versus social and environmental risk down the supply chain. And we did that again more recently. We did it a few years ago and again last year. And we noted and through that assessment revealed that steel and timber were some key risk items for us, particularly with the international supply chain associated with steel and with timber, but some of the lack of transparency associated with that particular supply chain. So we have, through the sustainable design guidelines here, we have some requirements for our larger projects to address certain issues relating to steel down the supply chain, as well as timber. Not that we build with a lot of timber, but there is timber obviously that is used on our projects. Also within the draft sustainable design guidelines, where all this sits, we are asking for sustainability training of the supply chain, and we do reference the Sustainable Supply Chain School as a possible tool to undertake that training down the supply chain. And just that's the draft version 4, as I said, hopefully approved April this year. And that's just a piece of work that I just wanted to raise, because we are constantly ensuring we are demonstrating the value proposition of what we're doing from both the financial or affordability perspective, but also in terms of the broader economic benefits and the environmental and social community benefits. So we've had Edge Environment do a great piece of work last year, and following that, WSP, who did a piece of work testing the guidelines on an asset and seeing, well, how does it add value? And from a pure life cycle costing perspective, it provides a better life cycle costing outcome than not using the guidelines. So we're very happy that we've got some rigorous assessment behind the guidelines to get approved. So just to highlight that we have consulted significantly with industry on both the sustainable design guidelines, which have the sustainable procurement requirements in there, as well as the steel and timber requirements that I briefly mentioned. So we are committed to that industry engagement in all that we do from a sustainability and broader perspective within transport. We have obviously a lot of consulting firms, design consultancies there, principal contractors, and then also we have down the supply chain for the steel and timber requirements. So we're making sure what we're asking our supply chain to do is actually feasible, and that's a big part of what we've been doing. Have I been 10 minutes? 10 minutes, is that up? 10 minutes is up?
Another 2 minutes.
Another 2 minutes. No, I think that's pretty much it, except to say, watch this space. I think we're getting more sophisticated in what we've been doing, and we've been listening to feedback from industry about what works and what doesn't work, and we believe the next version of the guidelines reflects that feedback, and so it's more streamlined and more consistent and sophisticated for industry. Thanks.